All right. I don't know how much time we have. I know that tonight there's going to be Smoking None on Non Sequitur Show with Kyle and Without a Crystal Ball, I believe. And I think that's going to be at, from what I understand, 9:30 Eastern. So I got a little less than 2 hours. So I don't want to step on them. And hopefully they can come on in and they can weigh in on the debate that I had with the Duke. So this is actually going to be a hangout that's open to anybody. Anybody who wants to have the link, message me. I will give it to you. I'm doing it as a regular hangout. Yes, they're going away. So as of next month, we won't have the ability to do that any longer. We're going to be switching primarily for me to Zoom. That I found to be the most easiest way to have these types of hangouts without too much of a production like I have to do with OBS. So if you want to have critique me in the live chat, you're more than welcome to. If you want to critique me in the actual hangout, you're more than welcome to. Just message me and I will get the link out to you. I have never, what's funny is I never really found a great way to get the hangout links out to people in a way that's trustworthy because, of course, snipers and porn bombing and all that kind of stuff. So when I did it one time, I had basically a list of people that I kind of had pre-approved, but even that kind of went to crap. So good thing that I don't have to worry about it anymore after Hangouts go away and we won't even have this format. So, anyways, first, let me know what you think of the debate. It is on Modern Day Debates channel. The link is in the video description. It ran for 2 hours, which is longer than I expected, but we didn't even cover a fraction of the things I was prepared for, which is kind of good and kind of bad, I guess. I mean, I think that, and I don't mean to discourage Duke at all. He stepped up, and I give him props for that. Do I think he was a little above his league? Honestly, yes, but at least he stepped up. At least he was trying. And I think that if I would have got into anything a little bit more complicated, it would have just been lost and really wouldn't have been serving my purpose, which my goal from the beginning of that debate, as I pointed out, was to at least get the information out there, how these things are thought of it in the literature. So if you want to actually go read these things, you would use the way I'm using these terms, because I do see a lot of atheist groups, they don't put this information out there, and then some of them will even go so far to say that that information doesn't exist or that information is not how it is, and that's just silly because anybody can go check this stuff, right? I mean, I'm not putting out something that's against the philosophical literature, and in fact, Duke has actually capitulated that, and he actually says that yes, this is how it is in the literature. I just don't agree with that. Okay, well, whatever. If you can say, hey, this is how it is in the literature of biology, but I don't agree with evolution. Okay, you have to show me why evolution's wrong. And I felt that in this debate, he had a lot of assertions, but he didn't actually show me why I was wrong in anything, why that I was incorrect in anything. He just basically parroted the New Atheist Party line, but didn't really bring anything to the table as far as evidence or citations or even a reasonable argument, in my opinion. But we didn't get to the part of the discussion I thought we're going to have, which is going to be the value of having different usages, applying my usages versus his usages. And I wish we kind of would have, maybe in the next debate or next discussion, about which one has more of utility. But unfortunately, I don't think he was at a level to even understand some of the basic epistemological concepts. And I spent too much time evaluating those and explaining to him some very basic things that I think most of us would have taken just as granted. And that kind of slowed down the conversation and didn't get to the second part of my debate, which was the utility of these terms rather than just the material facts. And again, I'm doing a little self-assessment of myself, a little critique of myself. I probably spent too much time on the material facts because he didn't understand the material facts, I thought. But anyway, so what do you guys think? Who wants in? Message me. You will get the link if I know who you are. Lucifer Almighty says that was painful. Yes, and I did post Lucifer Almighty's critique. I think that he summed it up perfectly. His critique was here. I'll just read it for you because I thought it was pretty well written, and it basically, to me, summed everything up in just one post. So, what Lucifer Almighty said was, oh, hang on. He said, that was painful. Duke just couldn't get it. He was full of fallacies and was extremely rude for calling Steve dishonest when Duke didn't even look to see what the literature said. You can't just dismiss the literature just because you don't like it. You're trying to force usages on people. Not all non-theists are atheists. That's just how it is. Going into poisoning the wells, there are no gods usage. The no gods usage is used by atheists in philosophical literature. I should have brought my tinfoil hat. And the philosophical usages give us far more nuances describing what we believe, and the colloquial is very vague. This was like listening to Bionic Dunce and even he admitted he didn't look into the philosophical usages because he didn't care, because they were just wrong. And I thought that really articulated well what I was thinking the entire time. He didn't read any of the literature. He didn't read any of the sources that I have. And because of that, how do you understand the topic? How do you go into a biological conversation saying evolution is wrong if you don't understand evolution? This is the same thing we run into a creationist. If you're going to debate a topic, I would think that you at least have some understanding of the arguments. Whether you agree with them or not is fine. That's the point of the debate, right? I understood he doesn't agree with the philosophical usage of these things, but he didn't seem like he even had a handle on that, even though he said he did. So, John Peterson, yes, let me get you in here. I will get you guys links right now. And then, like I said, give me your bad, you're good, what you thought. I'll take it. I'm not thin skinned. So if you think I suck, that's fine. I don't mind, but I want to know the reason. That's all. Yeah, that's the other thing I ask when I get, do these critiques. I like to know why people thought the way they did. I was reading the live chat. I went back and listened a little bit, and I kind of read some of the live chat, and it pretty well seemed that the only people that didn't agree with me didn't understand it. And I do mean that very sincerely. I don't think they understand it well enough to whether they agree or disagree. I'm fine with somebody understands it and disagrees. That's a whole different ball game, right? And I do know atheists out there that I have utmost respect for that do understand these things and just happen to disagree, and they prefer a different usage. I have real no argument for that, right? I mean, I could argue from utility, which one's a better way of using things, and that's fine. That's a fair discussion. But I can't debate that they don't understand the topic, right? And that's a whole different thing from somebody who's never read any of the literature. So, John, did you listen?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, let me set my alarm real quick.
I'm going to switch to my phone because I can hear I'm echoing through with this laptop. So,
all right,
I'll be back.
All right. Let's see here. William, good job, Steve. That was an angry dude. Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, he seemed very passionate. I don't know if he was angry, but you can't win a debate just by asserting things. Rhetoric will only get you so far. And if you're going to make assertions, you need to bring some kind of evidence, not this your opinion. This was not, to me, at least the first half was not supposed to be opinion based. It was material facts. And he didn't give any material facts. He didn't bring any citations. And even in Twitter afterwards, everything that he's actually showing me now supports what I've been trying to tell him. He's actually making the position. He's actually saying that theism is not a claim. And I'm trying to explain to him theism is the claim that God exists. That is how it's understood to be almost ubiquitously. I don't know anybody besides one person in one Facebook group who is a theist who holds that position. It's a very bizarre position to take, to say that theism is not a claim. And any belief is a belief position that is a claim against the ontology of reality. And I showed him SCP on it, and he showed me like something along the lines of theism is the belief that God exists, not understanding that belief is an epistemic position, and that belief is a ontological claim. You can't get out of that. That doesn't get you out of the burden of proof. I mean, if theist says God exists, they have a burden of proof, and most people recognize that atheism, if you go by the philosophical definitions, is the belief that God doesn't exist, and that is something that requires a burden of proof. Nobody really disagrees with that I can see in philosophy, right? They'll argue that atheism is not a belief, but they do recognize that if you define it as a belief, that clearly is a claim, and it clearly has a burden of proof. He doesn't even get that far, right? So I'm starting with somebody in that debate who I think didn't have the basics to even really get into the nuances of what has better utility. So I do apologize that we didn't get to the second half of the debate, which was supposed to be more what has more utility, sensu lato, which is going to be the broad version of these words, or sensu stricto, which is going to be the more strict versions of these words. And I apologize for that, but it was hard getting past the basics. Yeah. So, and by the way, I don't have my camera on, but my hair is still wet. So
your hair is still wet. Is that what you said?
Yeah. From obviously from the debate. Yeah. Let's see here. How do I turn this on? Yeah. My hair gets all curly when it's wet. I was taking a quick.
I don't understand.
shower.
I was on Hangout earlier today and used this laptop, and there was no like feedback going. I didn't have headphones on. I just used the laptop as is, and there was no feedback going through the stream I was on. And then as soon as I got on yours, I could hear it echoing through. I don't know if you were hearing it on your end, but I don't know what I
No,
did.
I couldn't.
Well, unfortunately,
All right, but you got it straightened out now. So what do you think? Give me your critique.
well, that's what I was just going to say. I
draw my
thought
hair.
other people were coming in. I came in to hear what they had to say, and I want to hear what you have to say because, as it turns out, I had my phone sitting here, was watching some things on the laptop, waiting for the notification for that to come. But apparently, when you fall asleep in front of the laptop and you're snoring, you don't hear the notification.
Oh, so you didn't watch it.
I just was watching it when you're starting to watch it when your notification came through for this live stream. But I heard you reading Lucifer's critique of it, and who was it? I don't know if he put it this way in his critique or if you just misspoke. He called somebody something dunce.
Bionic dunce. Yeah,
Bionic dunce.
Yeah, that's right. I read it verbatim.
Oh, okay, that's his loving nickname.
For Bionic Dance.
But yeah, unfortunately, I guess I was the wrong person to come in first. But
it's all good. Old boy says, I didn't watch the debate. Pick on someone your own size, Steve. You think you could ever get Matt? Come on, no. And Matt, again, I have no issue with Matt. I don't know why he seems to be having a problem. I know he strawmans me a lot. But I've never had any conversations with Matt from the last time he was on Non Sequitur. That tells you how long ago. I mean, I gave him like 5 tweets on Twitter and he blocked me. And then he's running this weird narrative that there's reasons why he won't have a discussion with me. I have no idea what they are. And I don't really care. I'm fine that he doesn't because I'm not going to get any pushback from him when I put out this information, which is fine. It makes it easier for me because now my views go unchallenged by him. Right. I'm okay with that. I mean, if he wants to challenge it, he can, and I'd be fine to defend my positions, but he's not going to challenge them. So it just saves me time. So I don't mind that.
That's the biggest thing. I don't understand why, because he doesn't seem like somebody that is afraid to engage anybody. So why won't he engage you on that?
I scare people, I guess. I don't know. And I mean that flippantly, but still, I don't know what it is. A lot of these people will engage with anybody. They'll take on theists. They'll take on anybody, right? But for me, no, I'm not going to do that with Steve. Okay. You don't have to. Just what I said. Duke at least stepped up. John Buck says, I think you shouldn't have used so much technical philosophical jargon. It just aggravated Dude and made it hard for him and us to follow. And that's a fair point. But to rebuke that a little bit, Buck, I have found that if I don't be precise and I don't use the jargon, at least somewhat, and I could have got worse, trust me. And I'm not trying to be a pendant. I'm not trying to confuse people. I have to be precise because people will take me out of context every time, right? I mean, we've seen it. There's channels out there that have taken my arguments and just straw man the crap out of them. And so I have to go out of my way to make sure that doesn't happen. That's the only reason why I get into these debates and discussions. I try to make sure that I'm not going to be taken out of context. And that's it. That's the only reason.
Well, the other thing is that when you're having a philosophical discussion such as that, which that's what it is. I mean, there's certain terminology you can't get away from, or you're not going to be able to explain, your position. I mean, you're not talking about.
Well, it's funny,
subject.
John. What's funny is I can be a lot more loose in my terminology when I'm talking to somebody who knows philosophy, because it's kind of like abusive notation. We know what we mean by it. We don't have to use the formal terminologies.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is funny is I'm a lot more lax. I mean, when I'm talking to Ozzy or something, I know he knows what I'm talking about. And if he wants to clarify something that I can, but I don't think Ozzy's sitting there going, oh, because Steve's using more general words, he doesn't know what he's doing or doesn't know what he's talking about. So, Mackie says, when Steve asked Duke if he knew what non-cognitivism was, he said it was irrelevant. Minutes later, he asked for an explanation of meaning, a Kodak moment. And I see that a lot. This is what happens when atheists, for some reason, have to defend something that they think needs defending, and they don't understand what exactly they're defending. It's a knee-jerk Pavlovian type response, and I pointed that out numerous times. If all you're going to do is parrot something and make assertions, you're not really understanding the concepts, nor are you defending anything properly. And I think we see that quite frequently, and I think we saw it in that discussion tonight.
I noticed the debate was quite long, at close to 2 hours.
2 hours, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think usually James holds it to around the 90-minute mark. So
he's going to get some views off that, so I'm pretty sure that he wants to have a little longer. Floyd says, it seems like people don't want to put the hard work in to defend the position. Yeah, I spent, quite some time on preparing for this. I have notes. He said he took notes. I don't know what notes he took, but I have long form outline of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to talk about. And I only got to some of it, but I did prepare for this.
It's funny you say that, because it's like one of those things that, if for anybody that knows you or encounters you on the internet, for you to say, I prepared for this, it's like nonsensical. I mean,
I don't think he prepared for this.
You don't do anything without preparing for it.
Yeah, so, I don't think he prepared. I really got that impression. He was very ill prepared. Sandrick says, I don't think Matt cares. He's pushing an agenda and you're a distraction. That you're right. No, you're exactly right. And they know that I'm a distraction to it. I mean, they really get a scour on their face when anybody brings me up or anything of the arguments, because it is a distraction to their agenda. This is a political agenda. And I don't remember who said it in the live chat on the actual debate. I think it was, who was it? But I think it was Tyler Durden. But somebody had said that American atheism is a political group. They're not a philosophical group. And they're really pushing a political agenda, not a philosophical agenda. And I think that was spot on. Yeah, I was really confused. Somebody had mentioned about affirm and believe. Okay, please let me know if I'm confused on this. I may have heard him, because I'm in the moment. But you guys are listening. Did he not originally say, stop using affirm, use belief? And then he said, stop using belief, use affirm, or the other way around? I was really confused at what he wanted me to use, because he just was kind of all over the place on it. I think at first he said, don't use belief, use affirm, because he didn't like the word belief. And then he changed it to don't use affirm, use believe. Or was I hearing things wrong? Again, it's kind of hard when you're in the moment, but did you? I don't know what he wanted me to use or why it made a difference.
I'm kind of lost on that. How could you replace one with the other, though?
He at the very beginning, when I said, like, you believe the proposition to be true, he said, well, no, don't use belief, use affirm. And then 20 minutes later, he's like, well, no, you're confusing me. Don't use affirm, use belief. I'm like, either way, these are just propositional attitudes. They're just an attitudes towards a proposition. I believe it's true. I know it's true. I hate P. I like P. I love P. Whatever it is, those are just propositional attitudes rather than psychological attitudes, right? If I say, if I have a belief in my head, that is a psychological belief. But when we're talking about beliefs propositionally, we're saying that we believe that the proposition's true. We're not so much saying that I hold the belief in my head that God exists. Now that's fine. You can address it that way, but that's just a difference between a psychological belief and a belief about the proposition, which is a different belief in your head.
So basically, he was calling you out on that terminology. It was kind of an equivocation fallacy, because he wasn't seeing that there's two usages for that term.
Yeah, well, it was more than an equivocation fallacy. I think it was more belief and affirm. I don't see a distinct difference between the two. What's the difference? If I say I affirm the proposition, I'm saying I believe the proposition. And again, if somebody who knows epistemology far better than I do has a way to discern between the two, and they think there's a discernment between them, I'll listen to you. I really want to know if there's something between them that I'm missing, but I've never seen them used anything but interchangeably with respect to a proposition. If you affirm it, your propositional attitude is belief. So they're related in that way, at least.
But the two usages of belief, like you were saying, like a belief in God is not the same as, I believe the car is blue because I can see it's blue. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you see it's blue, you believe that it's blue. That's called causal theory, actually. What happens is, who wrote Plantinga, I believe it was. He wrote, if I look out my window and I see a tree, I believe that I see a tree because it's a causation of causal theory that I'm looking at a tree that causes my belief. I can't force myself to believe there's a tree there, and I cannot force myself not to believe there's a tree there. So Plantinga is right on that. I mean, that's what dostastic involuntarism really is that I'm not choosing to believe there's a tree when I look out my window.
So,
I'm
looking at this chat. I don't see anybody else screaming to get on here and talk to you, Steve.
Well, I mean, they could critique me from the live chat. I'm not going to like get all butthurt if they think I sucked. I just like to know why. I like to be critiqued. Ocean gave me some good tips, but I think he understands that I was rushed and I couldn't get to where I wanted to go. But you know, me and Ocean agree. Yes, this is what we would have done. It had to be more time and things of that nature. That's a constructive criticism, you know.
And now I have to assume, and I'm going to go watch this later, but I have to assume that since it was on James's channel, there was no dumpster fireishness to it.
It got a little passionate. I think that Duke was frustrated because I just don't think he was understanding the terminology and the topic, and he had not prepared. And I think that he was just throwing shit against the wall and see what stuck. I saw a lot of that. I was like, I mean, at one point he didn't even accept logical stuff. He didn't even accept that theism is. He doesn't think that theism is a claim. I've never heard of that from an atheist before. Every atheist I know says that yes, theism is the claim that God exists. I literally don't know any atheist that thinks otherwise.
Boy, you know, actually, now that you said that, I have heard someone. Who is it I'm thinking of right now?
There's a theist who thinks that. That's John from the Facebook groups. But I only know one theist who thinks that, but I don't know any atheist that does.
Right. Okay. That's from. Yeah. I was thinking of a theist too. Yeah. That just boggles me when they claim that.
Dave says. Yeah, Dave says, Friskin says, can you explain your comment that belief comes before knowledge? E.g., practically my knowledge stops belief that others may have. Yes. The reason why knowledge is a subset of belief is because knowledge in epistemology must meet certain criteria, certain conditions. One of the most common ones, justified true belief, is a tripartite condition, meaning there's three things you have to agree to in order to have knowledge, or claim that you have knowledge. One of them is the proposition has to be true. The other one is you have to be justified to believe the proposition. But the main one, well, in this case, the pertinent one is that you have to believe the proposition is true. So if I believe P is true, then I can know P is true. I can't know the proposition is true if I don't hold the belief first, because to have knowledge, you have to meet those three conditions. That's why. And don't confuse knowledge with explicit knowledge, which would be more like information. I can have information about a topic, right? I can know about a topic, which is just I have information about my head. But that's different from saying that I know P. Know is a epistemic propositional attitude. So when I say I know P, or I know that P, means I meet the conditions for the tripartite justified true belief conditions. That's why.
Well, but isn't it true though too that belief comes before knowledge, but you can also gain a belief and knowledge like at the same time on a particular point.
Well, yeah, I'm not really using it as a temporal thing, right? Yeah. I mean, when I mean that, what I mean by before is that you have to have belief in order to have knowledge. Whether it's simultaneity or where it's difference in temporal is irrelevant to me. What it is though, you cannot know something unless you believe it, because knowledge is a subset of belief. Right. There's no theory of knowledge that says otherwise. And yes, I know there's some papers out there that argue semantics, but that's not what we're talking about here. I've read those papers. I know exactly what people are talking about, but that's not. Even those papers agree that in justified true belief, you still need belief to have knowledge. Let's see here.
So was it hard, Steve, when you got back from your little vacation there to kind of get back into the swing of things?
Yeah, I've been doing this for years. I know these topics pretty decently. Now, granted, like I said, I prepared for this. I over prepared for it, like I usually do. He didn't get into a lot of stuff that I was hoping to get into. But you know what's funny is I accomplished my goal. Whether you think I won the debate or lost, which, by the way, if you think I lost the debate, I really want to know why, because I don't know how you could think that. But whatever, I like to know. But my goal was at the very beginning to at least explain the material facts as they are held, most commonly held in the literature. And I think that I accomplished that without even having to actually show the evidence. And I showed some, but he was really to agree with it arguendo that is at least what the philosophical terminology is used as in the literature. At least I thought he was agreeing to that. Hopefully I'm not strawmanning him, but that seemed to be the case.
Yeah, I never even heard of this guy.
Oh, he's just from Twitter. Yeah. Banana says, doesn't the Stanford article acknowledge multiple definitions of atheism? Well, we all acknowledge multiple definitions of atheism. That's why they're polysemous. My argument has always been that there are more definitions, and I've used the philosophical definitions. The argument is that when you have somebody like Duke, he's insisting those definitions are wrong. He literally have told me in the debate that I'm wrong to use them, those philosophical terminologies, incorrect and is wrong, his words. That's where the problem lies, because now he's forcing his colloquial definitions onto me. See the problem? I'm not. This is where Matt Dillahunty gets it wrong. I've never argued prescriptively that atheism is a belief that God doesn't exist as the only definition, that you must adhere to that to be an atheist. Never have I ever argued that. If you lack a belief, you're an atheist if you label yourself an atheist. I've never said otherwise. And yet there's this narrative out there that Matt Dillahunty's been going on to different channels saying, well, Steve's trying to tell people if they don't believe in God and they don't hold a belief that God doesn't exist, they're agnostic. They're not atheist. Show me in a video where I've ever said that. Good luck with that.
I'll tell you what, that kills me because I encounter people like that all the time whenever you come up like in different chats and stuff, and they want to try and claim that you're trying to tell people how to define themselves and what definitions to use. And if I catch it, I try and tell him that's not what he's saying. He's speaking from a specific point of view, a philosophical point of view, and he's not trying to tell anybody how to label themselves. If you want to call yourself a atheist or a weak atheist or an agnostic, whatever you want to do it.
But I also explain the baggage that comes along with it too. If somebody says they're a squircle, I'm a square circle. Okay, let's examine what you mean by that. You can call yourself anything you want. I've never convinced anybody or never went out of my way to convince somebody their position other than what they hold. But I have had people change things on me and say, yeah, you know what, I am going to call myself agnostic now to be more in line with the literature. Okay. I've also had people that thought they were agnostic were actually strong theists, or strong atheist. I have one I know for a fact in the live chat right now. Before, I think they tended to agnosticism, but now they tend to more strong atheism, which, okay, I'm not trying to I don't have an agenda. That's the greatest thing. I don't need to promote agnosticism, right? I'm not trying to convince people to be agnostic. Strong atheists, I'm sorry, most of them do have an agenda, and they want you to be a strong atheist. Even weak atheists have an agenda. They want you not to believe in God. I don't care either way.
I had a guy in a chat the other day that, and he wasn't trying to be pejorative. He was seriously arguing that toddlers or like a person with debilitating brain damage, didn't really have any kind of thought processes going on, that he was trying to argue that those people were atheists.
Yeah, well, that's what he would do. That's what he did too. I mean, he argued that babies were atheists, sure.
I mean, but I told him, I said, well, look, if you don't have the ability to consider the proposition, you can't be either atheist or theist because you don't have the ability to consider the question and make a decision on it. So how could you be an atheist?
Well, because that's the agenda that they're pushing. This is the political agenda that they're pushing, that if you don't believe in God, you are an atheist by their uses of their words, their definitions. Okay, well, nobody's disagreeing that that's their definitions. The argument is what gives them the right to use their stipulative definitions to people that hold to more sensu stricto or more philosophical definitions. What gives them the right to do that? I don't believe that they have a right to do that. I think that's dishonest. I think it's disingenuous. I'm not going around saying that they have to call themselves an agnostic if they are agnostic on the proposition. That's completely up to them. But they're literally putting this narrative out that if you don't believe in God, you are an atheist, bar none, period, done, end of story, game over. People are now waking up going, oh, crap. Yeah, Steve's right on that. That's not necessarily the case. And that's what's bothering a lot of these new atheists, because I'm giving them pushback because their narrative is just fucked. Their narrative is misleading. If they would say, look, using our definitions, You are either an atheist or theist, right? I can't argue against that. That is true. But they're not saying that. They're not saying by their definitions. They're more saying this is the way it is, period. Go look at American Atheist about page. They say atheism is one thing, the belief, the lack of belief that gods exist. That's it. Boom, done deal. And that's not true.
I mean, I think that they also get bogged down by, I don't think that they see a distinction between the term non-theist and atheist. And there's a big distinction. And there's a big distinction between them.
Yeah, well, I understand that. You understand that, but they don't. Matter of fact, Arn would argue that atheism and non-theism are absolutely synonymous terms. And yet, when you ask for evidence of where that actually is none to be found. It's just that they're making that up in their group. That's a stipulative way of looking at things. Because there's nowhere that I've ever read in any philosophical paper that has said atheism and non-theism are synonymous terms. They're just not. As a matter of fact, there's something called when you instantiate something differently and it changes the propositional value, it's called intentionality. So if you have an intentionality problem with an S, not with a T, and intentionality problem, it means if you take one word and you replace it with another word, it may change the propositional value if that word is used in a proposition. And what happens is if you replace non-theism with atheism, there's a problem, I think, with intentionality there. They refer to different things, in my opinion. Because I can say that, I think rocks are non-theist, but if I instantiate, well, I shouldn't say instantiate. If I replace non-theist with atheist, rocks are atheist. I mean, that's just the way it is, and I think that's absurd.
Well, and because
to me, that's a false statement.
Because theist and non-theist is a true dichotomy. Theist and atheist is not a true dichotomy. Because, but they believe it to be a dichotomy.
Well, because in their paradigm it is. I mean, in their logic, they're setting it up that way. And again, I'm not saying you can't do that. Okay, what I'm saying is, if you do that, you have to accept the baggage that comes along with it. But in the literature, no, theism and atheism are not dichotomous. They're called contradictories, as I've told people. When people argue material facts, then they have a problem because they're saying, oh, well, that's not how it is in the literature. Now you need evidence because you're just wrong, because I guarantee you that how it is. Go read Atheism and Agnosticism by Grant Oppie. He points this out very clearly, that atheism and theism are not a dichotomy, but are contradictories. And if you want to argue that's wrong, that's fine, but you need to bring me reasons. You need to bring me evidence. And he brought nothing.
Yeah, I think also that certain people get confused by the A in atheist, because the prefix A in a lot of words means something different than what it means in atheist. I mean, if you're amoral, you're not moral, you're not immoral, you're amoral. But with when you say atheist, that it isn't exactly the same connotation of that prefix.
Well, and here's the thing. If we're looking at things from an academic point of view, right? If I give you a citation for what something's used in biology, I can go and give somebody an academic citation. I give a paper, and then people are fine with that for some reason. Atheists are like, yeah, okay. When we're talking about evolution, they're fine with that. But if you give them an academic citation for something along these lines, they don't accept that. For example, the A in atheist, right? I give them an academic citation for Stanford Encyclopedia, what A is supposed to be best understood for if you want to understand it in context of literature. And yet his opinion is something different. Well, what makes his opinion higher standard than the literature? That's like saying, well, I disagree that evolution is a change of electric frequency. Okay, but that doesn't change what it is in the literature. And you need to give me a good reason to accept the literature is wrong, because that's all he said was, well, the literature is wrong. That's now you're arguing to me like a creationist would argue. You're just saying literally that the experts are all wrong. All philosophers are wrong on this, but you've got it right. By what measure are you saying that you have it right, that they have it wrong?
They must have went to the Standing for Truth School of Biology.
He couldn't give me any. And again, I'm not trying to poison the well at all. You haven't watched the debate, but let me get you in here. Somebody wants in here. Yeah, Steve, one sec. There we go. There you go, Steve. Who else wants in while we're doing this?
The other night on Modern Day Debate in the chat, you talk about not understanding terminology. Nephilim Free was claiming that homophobia is simply the fear of homosexuals.
Oh, who said that? Effie?
Yeah, you kind of broke up on
Oh,
me.
I'm sorry. Who said that? Neffy?
Yeah.
No, the fear of homophobia is not the fear of homosexuality. It's
Right.
homophobia.
He
Yeah.
argued on and on about it.
Wow. That's bizarre. No. Yeah. Nephilim is not the sharpest knife in the cutlery set. Okay. Let's be
No,
honest
he's
here.
not.
And yet he thinks he is, right? He thinks he's so brilliant, and he wonders why nobody takes him seriously, because he's an idiot. That's why it's hard to take somebody seriously when they're just so goddamn dumb.
He's not even the sharpest Q-tip in the box.
Oh, hey, Steven.
Yo,
So did you watch?
I watched a good chunk of it, just not the whole thing, but the Q&A part and a little before that where he just started going, you know how Kent Hovind, when he reaches his epistemic limit, he just starts getting more aggressive and starts bouncing off the walls.
Yeah, no, I noticed that. This is what I'm saying. I've seen this pattern before when people are not when they're out there at their weight class, when they're out and debating something that they just don't understand. I see that approach a lot. Will get louder, get more boisterous, get more aggressive. And I'm not saying that we all don't do that, but I get aggressive for other reasons. I get frustrated. It's not that I don't understand the topic. It's that I have short a span of my patience with somebody who's seeming to me willfully is being either dishonest or deceptive. And I'm not saying he was in this debate, but he was definitely not trying to have a cooperative principle to understand what I was saying. I understood what he was saying. I've done this a long time. And for him to say that I don't understand his position is ludicrous. I'm an atheist if I talk to. I understand his position.
Yeah, it's just a regurgitation of keyboard atheism or American atheism or well, I don't know entirely Matt Dehoney's whole species of atheism, but I'm guessing it's branching off of that, only maybe less intelligible.
Yeah, no, I think he definitely parrots all of the above, sure.
Yeah, but yeah, like you said, whenever anybody reaches their epistemic limit, that's where they start getting aggressive and at hominish. But uh, and you've worked in retail, and I currently work in retail, so you see that frustration constantly, and that's where you're like, okay, what the hell is going on here? Why are you not understanding this? Why are you not doing A, B, and C? Why are you not understanding anything?
Yeah, I get that. I see customers do that, right? Yeah.
I'll tell you, I literally have never seen a debate that Kent Hovind was in that he didn't at some point, or maybe throughout the whole thing, be snarky as hell. It seems like that's all he has in his toolbox.
Well, then you have to understand. Well, yeah, I mean, you're going to come across that with just about anybody who's ignorant in any sort of subject, with science, mathematics, or history, or reality, or um, you see it also with patients that have psychological disorders, like the victim mentality. I've been victimized. I'm right about everything. You idiots are wrong. And the moment we start poking, prodding at that um, that ghetto that their mind is stuck in, that's where they start getting very aggressive and yeah.
I like that ghetto that their mind is stuck in.
Yeah, it's just basically a mental ghetto, and that's all they know, and they literally brainwash themselves, and it's so ingrained in their subconscious. That's their should I say that's basically their I don't know the word to describe it, but basically that's the very thing they treasure and cling to, and to so much as try to challenge the basis of its truthfulness or on the basis of its reality of being factual. Um, that's where the aggressiveness and defensiveness starts to rise.
Their fight or flight.
Yeah, well, in Duke's case, well, Steve McRae was just basically throwing the academic literature at him of what atheism is and what standardly is in academic circles. He just did not want to accept it. He was ignorant of it, and he just kept. He was just very dismissive of it because it He was just basically exposing his epistemic ignorance of the reality of what atheism actually is, which is a belief in the non-existence of God or gods.
Yeah, and well, what's worse is he actually says the literature is wrong. But when I asked him, did you read any of the literature? He's like, no. He's read absolutely no papers on it. He didn't even read SAP. And he's saying by fiat, I haven't read the literature, but I just know the literature is wrong. Therefore, I don't have to go read it, which to me is a creationist mindset, because that means he doesn't understand the concepts.
I get blowback all the time when I try and explain to people that atheism is a belief proposition, and they just won't. A lot of people just don't get it. That even if you don't believe something, it entails a belief as well. I mean, you can't get around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe Trump is a corporate troll that's giving every destructiveness to specific influences in the economic sector. I can't prove it, but that is my belief, and I have certain justifications for that. But
You don't
it's
have to
still a
prove it. You just have
belief.
to justify it.
Well,
Which I'm not going to ask you to do, but I mean, I'm sure you have your
yeah.
reasons, right? That's your justification.
Yeah. Basically, any sort of proposition about anyone, anything, subject, reality, whatever, what have you, that is out there, your mind still has to assent to that proposition. So you do believe in something, and somebody who lacks a belief in gods, well, just very particular atheists, the belief that gods don't exist, that they're fictions, they're nothing, they don't exist at all, there's nothing to justify it, that is still a belief, and your mind still has to assent that proposition with reasons. It's the same with theism and the belief of the existence of a god or gods.
Yeah, that's how I take it as well. Yeah. MJ, did you watch the debate? By the way, hey, buddy.
Hey, what's going on, Steve? Can you hear me all right?
Did you just get up?
I watched bits and pieces of it. I was just going to ask you a question about something in the debate. How did he define an agnostic?
Did I or how he?
How did he?
I don't think he ever really did. Yeah,
he never did.
Hear really good. Yeah.
But you defined it for him near the end.
Well, I take that back. He promoted the idea that agnosticism is about knowledge, but he didn't explain what he meant by that. Now, I got it in at the very end. I wish I could have gotten into a lot more detail on this, because I think this is very critical. That agnosticism, and by the way, MJ knows about philosophy here, guys, so I'm going to be speaking in terms for him. But MJ, would you agree that agnosticism, as Thomas Huxley would have used it, he was taken as a normative epistemic position, similar along the lines of evidentialism and logical positivism as a methodological approach, which I don't hold to, and I think you know that. However, he was taking it, the Duke was taking it as an epistemological proposition about the epistemic ability to understand if God exists or not, the knowledge if God exists or not the ontology. And so there's a huge disconnect there, because sure, you can use agnosticism in that way as the epistemological proposition, but in general dialogue, you don't. In normativity, you don't deal with the epistemological proposition. You're dealing with the psychological state of being agnostic on the proposition or suspending judgment on it. So when somebody says I'm an agnostic, they're not saying normativity wise or normative wise that they don't have any. They're not saying that I'm saying gods are unknowable. What they're saying is I don't have a position on the proposition of theism. That's how it's always used in the literature. Am I incorrect for saying that?
Well, I was just going to ask you, like, when you use the term agnostic or try to unpack it a little bit, he thought you were using it in a normative sense. Is that what was happening?
Well,
okay.
I don't think I understand the difference between the normative sense and the epistemological proposition sense. Now, again, you've read all the literature. You've read probably the same papers I've read, obviously.
I think you've read a little more, honestly. I'm rusty in this domain.
Would you agree, though, that when somebody in the literature is saying that they're agnostic, unless it's specifically stated otherwise, when they're dealing with the epistemological proposition, they're using it in the case that they're suspending judgment and they're not having an evaluation?
Yeah, it's typically in the context of the burden of proof. That's typically the way I've seen it used, and it's the epistemological sense. And then when it's unpacked more, it might seep over into the normative sense, but primarily it stays into the epistemological domain from my experience.
I don't agree with that. I don't think it does fall in the epistemological domain as much. When I'm reading these things, it falls into the well, unless you mean by, okay, the epistemological domain to me would imply that you're dealing with the epistemological proposition of the knowability of gods. And yes, that's brought up, but most of the time when I read something that says I'm agnostic or agnosticism, it's talking about the psychological position that you do not affirm a proposition to be true or false. Now, using that in the epistemic realm, because in that case,
that's where I was using it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. In that case, I agree with you.
It wasn't like a stronger claim, like you can't know, but just that the psychological report.
Perfect. Basically. Yeah. Then we're on the same page, and I agree with you 1,000%. And that's confusing to Duke. He didn't understand the nuance there.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people getting bogged down in that too. Not seeing the distinction between the two usages of.
Well, there's 3.
Agnostic and Gnostic.
I gave 3 in my blog. The normative epistemic principle, which would be again similar.
I want to be able to contribute to your blog so much.
I know you're a busy guy, but No,
remember I tried to log in, but it wouldn't let me. It wouldn't give me the email to verify.
Oh, by the way, I've been doing stuff with the domain. I had to eliminate a lot of accounts, so if I accidentally deleted somebody's account, sorry, you're gonna have to redo it. But there's thousands of email accounts and troll stuff that I just got rid of all of it today. So somebody had asked me a question. I guess I missed it. One sec.
And then I had another question whenever you had a chance.
Kathy, can you ask your question again? Or just copy and paste it, because I don't see what I missed. And Buck, you got some questions too. But yeah, go ahead. And by the way, did everybody read Nicholas's blog today called The Human Codex? Go check it out. He talked about the non sequitur show, and I happen to agree with him on most of it. One minor little point that I think that was maybe I don't think a specific person was treated too unfairly, but the rest of it I thought was a very well written piece. So go check it out by Nick.
Steve, there's also a confession I have to make to you. I was the one that asked you why you're citing sources from institutions that have been infiltrated and conditioned by Christians. Apologies.
Oh, okay, no problem. No, what's funny is but you dude, you say that, but you're not the only one that actually promotes that idea. Arn has promoted that idea before.
I did that on purpose, just being a troll. But the response from Duke, I was like, "Are you freaking serious right now?"
Wait, what's this now? Flesh this out a little bit for him.
During the super chat, I basically contributed and asked Steve why he's citing source word salad from institutions that have been infiltrated and conditioned by Christian apologists. And Duke said, "Yeah, that's right." Like he seriously believed that's true. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me right now?
He agreed with that. He was like, yeah, and I think that's the case. And I was like, well, again, that's what I see from some of the new atheist movement, because they actually promote that narrative.
Wait, what sources have been infiltrated by Christian apologists? SCP?
Yeah. SCP, IAP.
Yeah. Even though Paul Draper, who's an atheist,
that's pretty fun. That's pretty funny.
I think a lot of people, for some reason, have the impression that the SCP is like Wikipedia, that anybody can go on there and edit.
No.
When I say that SCP is the gold standard, it really is, because if you go, if you watch other videos and you watch other things, well, I can't fix my camera here. It's driving me nuts. Oh well. You'll actually see that people quote SCP all the time. Like literally, philosophers quote SCP. It is the gold standard. Now, again, you don't have to agree with it. And it's not, I'm not making the argument that it's stipulative in the fact that it's stipulating this is how you have to do things. But it's a resource. It's an educational resource that people, even the most even the PhDs in philosophy, go to SCP as a resource.
Yep.
So they make sure that the information is accurate. It's peer reviewed. Literally peer reviewed. Yeah. So you can't just dismiss it, right? Because he dismissed it so easily. It's like SCP is wrong. The literature is wrong. Okay, that's a value judgment. You have to explain to me what is wrong about it. First of all, and by the way, MJ, I was really holding back. If you watch it again or watch that part where I really wanted to get into ethical theories when he said it wrong, but I bit my tongue. Okay.
Oh, which part was it?
Because he started saying that in philosophy they're wrong, that the literature is wrong. Well, to me, I take right and wrong as value judgments in a ethical framework, right? So
I thought he meant erroneous. Okay.
so I was like, well, what ethical theory are you appealing to say that it's wrong? And I was going to
Is that what he meant? He thought
ethics.
that the philosophers were actually morally wrong.
It could. I don't know. That's again, we could have gone down a lot of rabbit holes there. Are they ethically wrong or morally wrong? Are they? I mean, are they objectively wrong, or what standard are you appealing to? Virtue ethics? Are you appealing to consequentialism? What are you saying that they're wrong by?
And that actually segues over into my question to you, because what I saw over and over again when I was talking to you with him, the perspective that I got from him is that he thought that when you cited professional philosophy, it was kind of quarantined to this ivory tower scholarly domain, when there's a lot of overlap between the concepts that philosophers do conceptual analysis with and the actual, words that we use in everyday language. And so there was this wedge that was being driven between, the scholars that have actually philosophically reflected on the concept, and it's the way the words are used in everyday language. And it seemed like he was borrowing from philosophical capital and actually wanting to promote a particular concept, but then not wanting to go to the philosophers that actually lend authority to that particular capital.
Yeah, and he could have quoted Bullivant. He could have quoted Martin. He could have quoted Smith. He'd never read Presumption of Atheism by Flew. He'd never even heard it before.
Yeah, that's a staple in the literature. You got to start there.
Yeah, and that's
you get the conversation going.
Because look, if I'm going to go against a biologist, I'm at least going to understand certain concepts, right? I mean, if I don't even know what a gene is, if I don't know what DNA is, I'm not going to be very productive having a debate with somebody who's an expert in these topics. I know I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I'm not going to embarrass myself. You have to have certain staples, as you said. I'm sorry, but in these discussions, I really do hold that Presumption of Atheism is a staple that is a must read. It's not a difficult read. It's not very long.
He sounded like he wanted to have his cake and eat it too, because it sounded like he wanted to motivate a sociological definition, which he was understanding in terms of identity. He wanted to identify himself as an atheist, as the object of Christian scorn and persecution and things like that. But then on the other side of his mouth, when you pressed him to do some kind of conceptual analysis of the referent of that sociological label, he was borrowing from certain capital that was making him fall prey to certain logical pitfalls that you were kind of pinning him in on, and he just didn't seem to know what the joints were with what you were trying to get at. As far
how do you argue? How would he argue his position if he doesn't know those things? And yes, I do find that it be a staple. I mean, you don't have to agree with Flew's paper. I don't. I think Flew's paper is crap, and I actually have much better papers that I've read that actually explain why Flew's paper is bad that I can give you. But I'm not going to go into the details about his argument for the innocence. About why it is that he thinks that we should hold those positions the same we do is in a legal standing, which is his argument. The main takeaway from that paper that you should get is the first 2 pages, is that he actually says that atheism is the belief that God does not exist. He's arguing that we should change that. Again, the whole political thing is we should change this, because you have atheists out there going, oh, well, Steve's trying to change the definition. No, I'm trying to maintain the status quo that's been for hundreds of years, because it's makes sense in a schema to hold it the way that philosophers do. Now, you can argue otherwise, but I'm not trying to change anything. I'm not trying to straw man anything, because I get that a lot. MJ, straw manning atheism. If you think that, you don't know this topic, because Flew, 1972, admitted this is how it is in philosophy. Read the paper. I've read it a couple of times, actually.
And you're doing a reductio ad absurdum too. I mean, if we go with their analysis, which is supposed to be in line with their sociological label, rocks are atheists. And it's just, not only are rocks atheists, but you can't distinguish your position from agnosticism, because it doesn't have the conceptual resources to distinguish their position from the position that you hold. I mean, you don't believe in God, but you're not an atheist. So it's hard to know exactly what the conditions are that would sufficiently separate them from a position like yours, when your position and their positions are quite distinct.
Well, that's why I told him before. He says that he's using definitions that are more nuanced, and I try to explain to him, no, quite the opposite. You're losing nuance. You're losing granularity.
Yeah, exactly.
And he doesn't understand the reasoning behind that, but I'm absolutely sure of that, because, as you pointed out, if you cannot distinguish properly between his uses of atheism and agnosticism, then you've lost that granularity there. In my paradigm, these are very different positions. And indistinguishable from each other. So how is it more granular?
Yeah, and he was trying to collapse your position into his. So when you said you didn't believe in God, then his response was, you're an atheist. But you're not believing in God isn't a sufficient condition for your agnosticism. It's a necessary condition. So we need to flesh out your concept a little more, to put a little more flesh and bones on it, and then you can see how your position is conceptually distinct from his.
Yeah,
I was a couple steps away.
That out, by the way, that lack of belief is a necessary precondition for agnosticism and atheism, but it's not a sufficient condition for atheism. This is why when I said, I don't know if you got that far, I said it is a fact that all atheists lack a belief, but not all who lack a belief are atheists. And anybody who knows philosophy would agree with that. But it's because lack of belief is necessary, but it isn't sufficient because there are philosophical definitions. So.
Yep.
Well, I don't know who said it earlier, but the atheists that want to cling to that lack of belief label are the ones that are trying to shield themselves from any kind of burden of proof.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that a lot of it, that's why my arguments that atheists have a burden of proof, regardless if you're a lack theist or an actual philosophical atheist, doesn't matter. Both of them have a burden of proof. I made a very clear, sound, and valid argument in a syllogistic form. I have not yet had one philosopher say that it's not correct. I had Stephen Hoyt try to tear it apart, and he had some really good observations, but his was more semantic and didn't really... I asked him to really go myopic on it, and he really did, but he still said it was a good argument. He says it's logically valid and sound. That's the takeaway. So until somebody can show me that it's not valid, which I think that'd be a wrong way to go about it, it's logically valid. If you want to deny the propositions, you need to tell me which propositions you deny and why. And I haven't yet found a person that can adequately do that.
MJ, do you have content on your channel?
Oh, no, I have 2 videos that I've uploaded. I haven't been very active. I got a friend of mine from school. I think we're going to actually upload some content soon. As soon as I do that.
Maybe we call you Dr. MJ soon?
No, that's like nearly half a decade into the future.
Please.
Yeah, the reason I ask is somewhere there's an alarm going off here. The reason I ask is I just met you and I've heard you've been talking for about 10 minutes, and in my head I'm going, man, I got to go check this guy's channel out.
MJ is one of the smartest philosopher guys I know.
Holy shit.
The quicker I'm put on the pedestal, the quicker I fall, though.
We go back to the Nadia days. Yeah, you know your stuff, but I mean, but your field is different than epistemology. I'd put you more. I mean, where would I put you in far as philosophy? Analytical philosophy or contemporary?
I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, you're right about. I read some of the stuff you've written, and it's way beyond my level that I'll ever hope.
I infuriate the continentals and the analytics. Honestly,
right.
I'm too continental for the analytics. I'm too analytical for the continentals.
Yeah, I'll try one day to actually understand some of the stuff you write, but it's like reading.
Where were you reading? Where were you?
Well, just your outline. Remember, you sent me an outline of something you were writing.
Oh, the scientism paper.
Yeah.
I'm almost done with that. That's right.
Oh man, yeah. I don't want to go into detail because you had mentioned this before about the detail on it, but not to go into too much detail. But your outline, I was like, I'm lost. I have no idea what any of these even.
Oh, really?
I don't know what the terms. I was like, I'm so confused here. So, but maybe once I read it when you're done, and
that's where the conversation starts. Yeah.
Yeah.
We definitely want to be understood.
But anyways, so I'm not going to have this too long open. But again, you have any critiques for me, MJ? Anything that you thought I did wrong?
Not that I could hear. You did say something really interesting. Did you say that that Flew was the one who brought up the court context first? Because I hear that.
Not really first, but yeah, I don't know about first, but in Flew's paper, most of it is what he's trying to argue is that in the court of law, we presume somebody to be innocent, right? We assume we have a presupposition until they're found guilty. And what Flew argues, and this is what the new atheists try to argue, is that we assume there's no God until there's a reason to believe there's a God. We presume atheism is the case. In this case, the lack of belief that there's a God, which is weird because the way I get it is this, and this is straight from a paper that I've read on this topic. So I'm not trying to say I came up with this on my own, but it's a very good argument against Flew's paper. And the way it's countered is that the reason why we have a presumption of innocence is because we're worried about judicial mistakes called judicial errors. There's 4 ways that you can have an outcome. You can have a guilty man that's guilty, which is we mean that it was excess. You have a guilty man go free, which is a judicial error. You have an innocent man go free, which is a success. And you have an innocent man go to jail, a judicial error. So there's two judicial possible errors. We in America, we value the fact that one judicial error is worse than the other judicial error. Okay, so we value the fact that we rather have a guilty man go free than an innocent man go to jail, and I hold to that, and I think that's good. This is why we have the presumption of innocence in the court system. There's a reason why we hold to the presumption. There's also an expectations of urgency. We want people to have a fair trial. We want people to be able to defend themselves, right? And we want the prosecution to make their argument, and then the defense attorney, of course, will counter it, but the prosecution has to make their argument. That's fine in the legal system. It doesn't work in philosophy this way. It just, and I don't mean as in far as that's not how it is. I'm holding the opinion that it fails as a methodological approach. The reason being is that in the two errors, right, God exists or God does not exist. It could be the case that you believe God exists and he does, right, which would be a success. You can believe God exists and he doesn't, which is an error. You can believe that God does not exist and he does exist, which is an error. And you believe that God does not exist and he doesn't, which is a success. But the two errors of God existing and you don't believe it, or you believe otherwise, God not existing and you do believe it, right? Vice versa, either one. Those are errors. So if a theist believes God exists and he doesn't, that's an error. But there's no urgency there. There's no urgency about why we have to have the presumption there. And also, there's no real disproportionate problem if you have a judicial error there, because in one case you have an innocent man going to jail. The atheist doesn't have any reason to presume anything. If anything, I would argue, and this is not in that paper that I read, but I would argue the theist would have the better argument for this if they wanted to argue it, that there is urgency there, because if the atheist doesn't convert and believe God exists, he's going to hell, right? So he would argue a presumption of theism, which would obviously get into Pascal's wager, but I can at least them seeing to try to make that argument. It's a bad argument, but there's no reason to presume atheism, because the judicial errors in this case between the theist and the atheist being wrong, so what? It's not the same as the legal system. And I think those are good refutations against Flu's paper. Why? Because I have actually read the literature on these things. He has not. He couldn't make those kinds of arguments that I just made.
Right. Now, there's the element of urgency. Does he bring up the element of being the positive claimant?
Flu?
Yeah.
Flu actually says in his paper, verbatim, that it's commonly held atheism is the belief that there is no God.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into, because I did agree with your logical point about him endorsing weak theism, according to the way he was spelling out the logical relationships of his positions.
But then, did you hear my logic on weak theism?
Well, that's what I mean. I was kind of following it, and then I ended up endorsing it by the end. I think that's correct. I think you were right in the way you unpacked the logic of the relationships between the different propositions. You performed contraposition on them. Was that right? I was driving while I was listening to it.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I was using the mirror approach, which would, I guess, be a contraposition.
Right. So if he believes that, if he does not believe that God exists, then he believes that God exists. I forget exactly the way you put it.
Oh, the way I phrased it was,
if
you're going to have the proposition that God exists and you just don't believe it,
you don't believe
that is weak atheism, and then he shortens it to atheism. The mirror of that is if God does not exist and you don't hold to that, then you're a weak theist, and you just shorten that to theist. So what you have is you have a atheist who doesn't actually hold the belief that God doesn't exist, which is normative in philosophy, and you have a theist who doesn't hold the belief that God exists, which is also normative in philosophy.
Correct.
He can't wrap his head around that because he's so ingrained to think that he's fine with theism is the belief that God exists, right? But he can't grasp that that atheism is a belief that God does not exist in philosophy. So here's a problem. You now have a situation, right? Weak atheism, which is somebody who just doesn't believe there's a God, but you're calling that atheism. But you also have weak theism, which is a position that you just don't accept gods don't exist, and you're calling that theist. What's the difference? That's mirroring.
You don't accept that gods don't exist. Exactly. That's weak theism. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yep.
Yeah, well, it's logically sound, you know.
Yeah, that's what you were trying to say with the not B, not P. Is that what that was? Not B, not P.
Not B, not P. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Malpass on the use of reason. He doesn't fully argue that, but I derive that usage from his blog. And I think it's very sound. I don't see anybody could argue against that. Because people say, well, how can you be a theist and not believe in God? Well, I don't think you really can. This is why I don't hold weak theism. This is why I think it's nonsensical to say weak theism. But by the same token, I don't think it makes sense to say you're an atheist if you don't believe, if you don't hold the belief that gods don't exist. It's the same thing. To me, atheism is the belief that God doesn't exist. So what's the difference?
And this is Dillahunty's error, correct? I mean, Dillahunty just says, I'm not convinced there's gods, but neither are you. You're not convinced that there's gods. So once again, we don't have Dillahunty's sufficient condition that would distinguish him from agnosticism.
Right.
And we do have your sufficient condition that would separate you from Dillahunty, which is that if I were to ask you, what else do you believe besides the fact that you're not convinced of any gods? You don't believe that there are no gods either.
Wouldn't that make my position more nuanced?
Right, because a more nuanced conceptual analysis has individually necessary and jointly sufficient conditions. If all you have is a set of necessary conditions and no jointly sufficient conditions, then they're not granular enough.
That's been my argument for
in the same way that if you define knowledge as justified belief, it's not granular enough because it's not jointly sufficient. You need justification according to typical JDP prior to Gettier.
JDP plus I use and I again, all of them have problems. I do believe the point that Dr. Linda Zabesky, is that how you pronounce her name?
Zabesky, yeah. I've met her.
Her paper is brilliant. That she says that all belief first theories have Gettier problems, and I think she's right on that because of epistemic luck. So if you take that as JTB, yes, there could be Gettier problems. Now you can try to alleviate some by adding a JTP plus, where you add in sensitivity, where you would say that if a person believes something in the next possible world over, then they're justified. But that gets into possible world semantics, which is very complicated.
Exactly.
But at least it's adding a tracking condition, right?
Or you just replace J with a W.
Like just to be the
Warren, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
just to be the idiot in the room.
You're not an idiot. You're the man.
But just to going off of what you and Steve were just discussing over the last several minutes, what I take away from that is that must be a lot of people out there who label themselves as atheists who are truly agnostic.
Well, I don't mean by truly agnostic. I think what you mean, I would put it as if you're using the terminology for philosophical speak, then yes, they would be agnostic on the proposition. And again, this goes to material fact. If you are a weak atheist, you are agnostic on the proposition. There's no way you get around that. Okay. But once you want to label yourself, that's your business. So I think what happens is Matt either has heard me say that or he has heard other people take that and misconstrue that to mean that Steve's arguing that weak atheists should label themselves agnostic or that they are agnostic. I'm not arguing that. But the material fact is that is what it means to be agnostic on the proposition. You don't have a belief either way. You can call that atheism. Whatever. There's different arguments to be had there. But that you are not on proposition, period. That's
what I meant by truly agnostic is in the philosophical sense. Yeah, they can label themselves however they want if they want to define terminology, but speaking from a philosophical standpoint, I would say that a lot of atheists are really agnostic, when you break it down,
Well, like my favorite mod, Sweet Heathen, not that I don't love the other mods, but one of my favorite mods. Okay, she is my favorite mod. Fuck you all. Sweet says, when I first adopted the atheist label, I was actually agnostic. Over time, I became a true atheist, and we've talked about that. And she moved from she always was an atheist, but she couldn't justify it. She was more of an agnostic, but now because of these conversations, she can justify her position as being an actual strong atheist or philosophical atheist. That's fine. See, I don't have an agenda. I'm not trying to push people into one position or another. So when people say, well, Steve's promoting agnosticism, you're full of crap. Never have I promoted that. It just works for me.
No, you're actually out just to really just get people to think and to be well informed about the reality of their position.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's true. And I think that's the problem we run into is when you have these other organizations out there that are not giving people all the information. It's one thing to say, look, this is how it is in the philosophical literature. We don't abide by that. We have our own usages. Okay, but they're not even doing that. They literally have said, this is the way it is. Anybody else who disagrees is wrong. That's ideology. That's dogmatism.
Steve, Can I ask you a question, Steve, real quick?
Yeah,
Did you see Dillahunty's debate with Braxton Hunter?
I watched. I got most of it, but I definitely watched the part with the kid. And
Exactly. That's exactly what I was about to bring up.
I could be totally wrong on this, but I'll buy a cup of coffee if I'm wrong on this. But I swear to you, I peered into Matt's head during that moment, and he was thinking, "Fuck you, Steve."
I think your face materialized in its imagination for a second.
Where can I see this?
I can put it in the. I'll put it in the side chat for you.
What would I type into the YouTube though? What would
I put it in the side chat for you, John.
Braxton,
you just want to click the link.
Oh my goodness! And so I'm not imagining that. Did you not see scowl on his face? And that's not the first time he's done that. He scowled on the other day when one of my friends from Facebook had called in to the Atheist Experience, and he had mentioned my name in my show, and he's like, I happen to watch Steve, and I love the Non Sequitur show. It's great. The look on Matt was just scowl, and it's the same scowl. This is why I'm confident that is exactly what he's thinking in that debate. And by the way, I don't like the way the kid approached it, honestly. And this was a problem because Matt thinks that because I'm agnostic, I have the same mindset as the kid and other people, and I don't. I think that approach was wrong. And so,
did you? I didn't think it was that bad. I think it was a little aggressive, but it was a little disrespectful. But
he was not acknowledging the fact that Matt uses the terminology different. I do acknowledge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
then it just evolved into a verbal dispute. Yeah.
He could use the definitions any way he wants. It was his debate, and so I think the kid was a little off base on that. My hair is still wet and it's unmanageable. But yeah, so I want people to understand that though. I'm not arguing that you have to use these terms. The kids seem to be arguing that this is the way it is. You must use it. And Matt's like, no, this is my debate, and that caused a barrier to be between them. But now Matt runs around thinking that I'm, as an agnostic, telling everybody else they're wrong. He's even said that on Atheist Ed.
Can I push back on you a little bit then?
What?
Just so I push back on that point, because I almost want to make your position a normative position. I want to make it a persuasive definition.
Sure.
Because I feel like once Matt was to say, look, this is the way I want to use the word atheist. I want to use the word atheist in the sense that I'm not convinced that there are any gods. Now, in order to distinguish himself from you, in order to make his position maximally granular, or however you want to say that, it's almost as if, because you're going to agree with him. You're not convinced that there's any gods either.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because yours is maximally granular, I'm just going to use that new terminology.
Fine-grained. Yeah.
It just seems like yours is the normative definition.
It is the normative.
And that's what I mean. And because it's a normative definition, then Matt ought to give up his definition, and that his usage of the word is in error.
No, I'm not going to go that far. The reason I'm going to give you a little pushback on that, and I know what you're trying.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, no, I want to hear it.
The reason I wouldn't put it as an ought is because people are allowed to have stipulated definitions for
definitely
context in a discussion, right? I
agree
with that because it makes things very simplistic. If he wants to have a debate and he wants to use his terminology in that microcosm of the discussion, I'm fine with that. That's not an issue.
Okay.
The problem is when he says that that my usage is not normative, which is wrong. That is wrong. I mean, it is normative.
It is normative, right?
And then when he says that I'm trying to tell people that their usage is wrong, he's actually said this. I've never said if you hold to a lack of belief position as atheism, you're wrong.
Okay,
that's not a word I use because, again, that's a value judgment. What I say is, I might say it's not in line with the literature, but you can use it. But you can't say that I'm wrong for using the philosophical usages. And that's what I get.
Okay, I see.
Literally, they're saying I'm incorrect. This was the whole debate.
Right.
4 or 5 times he said, well, Steve, you're wrong, you're incorrect, you're dishonest. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
Right. Now, you said you wanted to distinguish your position from the guy you debated today, I forget, the Duke.
Yeah, the Duke.
In the sense that you wanted to be coherent. Is that what the word you said? Mm-hmm. You wanted to be coherent. So if I were to push back on Matt and say, how do you distinguish your position from the agnostic position? How do you think Matt would respond to that? He
would say agnosticism is a position on knowledge.
On knowledge. Does he affirm that knowledge is a subset of belief?
Yes.
Okay, and if it's a subset of belief, and he doesn't have the belief that there are gods, then doesn't he have to import your sufficient condition?
Well, no, because he's using
in order to distinguish the agnostic from the atheist.
Using it as an he uses agnosticism, from what I gather, as an epistemological proposition that God is knowable or not knowable, right? So he's using agnosticism in a different way. The problem, I think, is that it becomes an equivocation issue, because when we're talking about agnosticism in respect to theism, the suspension of judgment, and he doesn't acknowledge that. So the way I would argue it is, how does he want to have sufficiency to differentiate between the agnostic who does not take a position on the proposition and himself as somebody who just lacks a belief? That's where the key is, right? What's the sufficient condition that differentiates between the two? He doesn't have it.
That's my point.
He really doesn't have any.
Exactly, and because he doesn't have any, he doesn't have a symmetry breaker between the analysis that he would give for agnostic and the analysis that he would give for the kind of atheist he wants to be.
And I would ask Matt that. I would ask that.
Exactly, but I mean, just relative to his the coherency condition that you want to ascribe to yourself, that if we were to ascribe it to him in terms of proper usage of the term, it seems like he's internally inconsistent and therefore incoherent with the way he's distinguished agnostic from atheist for his own usages.
I think there's some incoherency issues, but maybe not specifically that. I think the incoherency issues is that if you actually go watch some of his shows, he has actually let it slip a few times. Talk about his belief. I mean, I believe there's no God, or he's not an ontological naturalist, so you can't get him on that, right? Because an ontological naturalist, you're a strong atheist. But he has said, he's talking about his beliefs, and that he believes there's no God. He has said this a few times in passing, but then he'll default to, well, atheism is merely a lack of belief. So it's like he'll admit that he even holds a belief there are no gods, and then he'll be like, "No, I just don't lack a belief." It's like, no, come on, you cannot do that, man. You can't in one video say, "Yeah, well, yeah, God's a bullshit," and then the next one saying, "I just merely lack a belief." That's inconsistent to me.
Right. So he switches back and forth between Steve coherency and Matt incoherency. Is that what you're saying?
Switches back very much so. Let's see here. Check my messages here.
Yeah, I didn't ever picked up on it until you just mentioned it. Now I'm going over in my head all the different times I've heard him do that.
No, so I'm not just making that up, right? I actually have the videos. Somewhere.
No, you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to make a video that one day. But I'm not just making it up. He has actually said this, and I know people that know him, of course, and he has told them he believes that gods are bullshit, or he believes that God doesn't exist. I think that if you pin him down on it, he's going to have to agree with that. I'm not trying to strawman him, but I've heard him say these things. But then you can't just say, well, I just merely lack a belief. That's just weird.
I think he made the distinction between, if you were to ask him personally what he believes, he would say there are no gods. But in a debate context, he would just say, I'm not convinced that there's a God. Because I think he has that juridical context that he applies to debate context. So he's not going to assume a burden of proof.
Yeah, and in the show, the same way. And I get it for the show, right? If I had a show, I'd probably take a stance too. Look, I'm not there to defend my views. I want you to call in and give me your, because if not, all I'm going to be doing is defending my views the entire show. I get that. I do agree with them. That makes sense in the context of the atheist experience. Not an issue there.
Yep.
But in a debate, this is where the kid made the mistake, right? We talked about the kid earlier. He was like, well, he's taking the pro, you're not taking the con, with the negation. Now, I generally believe that a good debate is that one person takes the position that is true, one person takes the position that's false. It doesn't have to be that way. As long as he's going into the debate with I'm not taking the false position, I'm just saying that I don't believe, okay, that they can have a debate structured the way they want. To me, though, that's kind of a boring debate, because all I have to do is sit back and say, okay, MJ, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't offer anything. And yet,
it's really easy to do that.
It's really easy to do that. And yet, when Matt argues evidence for strong atheism, whether he accepts it or not, he can justify it. He knows enough about the topic, he can justify it.
Of course, yeah.
So when you're arguing against a theist and you're giving them all the reason why you don't believe them, most of the time it's reasons why you're justified to say gods don't exist. It's transportable, I call it.
Yeah.
Just sitting there going, I don't believe you sounds an awful lot like, how do you know that?
It's just really easy to say that. I mean, you can dedicate your entire life to constructing like some kind of wire-drawn reasoning that implies some kind of exotic Berkeleyan idealism or something like that. And all the skeptic has to do is come along and say, I'm not convinced of that. That's not good enough for me. I'm not going to believe that. And it's just extremely simple to be a skeptic to me. But then there's an honest kind of skepticism that's a little more productive in the context of philosophical dialogue. But sometimes it's just like, well, what is that all you got? Like when Samuel Johnson was walking with James Boswell, he heard about Berkeley, and then Samuel Johnson just kicked the stone and said, I refute him thus. Well, it doesn't work like that, Mr. Johnson.
I don't think that he refuted me on anything. Everything he had was just bare assertion. And that was the problem.
Oh, with the Duke?
Yeah, the Duke had nothing. He didn't. How do you go to debate? You don't have
his perspective. It was a verbal dispute.
You don't reference anything. If you don't do any of that, you're merely just giving your bald opinion.
It seems like he was trying to stay within the domain of the sociological identification definition, but then when you pushed him and asked him to qualify the sociological definition, it just involuntarily switched over into the philosophical normativity of the definition, against his will. I think it just kind of sucks you in once you try to make your position more granular.
Well, because I explained it properly. I explained to him, look, we can't test beliefs, And then when somebody asks a great question, they're like, well, how do you know Gnosticism's true? To me, that's a nonsensical question. Gnosticism isn't true or false. It is a psychological position. That's the difference. That's why if atheism and theism were merely just psychological positions, what would it mean to say that they're true and false?
Right, it wouldn't. Psychological attitudes aren't true or false. Correct. They're about things that are true or false.
That's when I've been arguing with people. You get it because you're a philosopher, but to try to explain that to Duke, he doesn't understand the epistemic considerations here, and it's very difficult for me because, as you know, I am a layperson. I don't possess the formal training like you've had, so I'm trying to present it in a way that makes sense from a purely layperson's point of view. Although you've seen me in the last, how many years it's been? I think I've come a long way, but I'm still learning it.
You're better than some people that were in my graduate class.
I'll tell you, anytime anybody
all it is reading books. That's all
it's
taking time to comprehend the issues.
Yeah. If I don't understand something, I'll ask an expert and go, hey, I really don't grasp this concept. Will you please explain it to me? Or just ask in general. Like the other day, I asked about the embedding problem, Frege's embedding problem, which I understood the basic gist of the embedding problem, right?
Okay, yeah.
Would you know Frege's argument on that?
The Frege?
Frege
argument? Frege? I'm very rusty.
It's basically saying that a non-cognitivist is a very difficult time
putting the propositions in like logical relationships.
Yes, exactly.
Boo, there's a murder over there, therefore you ought not to murder. And there's some logical relationship between the propositions, even though the propositions themselves are completely meaningless.
Bingo, you've hit the nail on the head. That's
exactly
the problem. So how do you form complex statements or sentences or even logical formations if these propositions don't even have a truth value because of their non-cognitive approach? And I think it's a good argument, but I tried reading the counter arguments for it before on SCP. I'm way out of my depths. And so I'm like, I need help on this. And so I posted what on the various philosophical forums, how would a non-cognitivist really defend against this? So I understood the argument as far as why non-cognitivism has this problem, but I'm not versed enough to understand their defeater of it, which it doesn't seem like it'd be a defeater. It's just an argument that they have about how they can go about defending it. Because wow, that gets some complicated semantic stuff.
It does. It gets
and then I'm out of my depths. I recognize when I'm out of my depths.
Me too. The quicker an individual gets there, the quicker they learn.
And this is why I'm happy to ask questions. I don't mind.
I actually had something written on that. I was going to try to retrieve that.
But see, you know what I'm talking about. It was difficult because when I'm trying to bring up these concepts of something like Duke, he's not even familiar with the concepts. So
at least nobody's having you drink hemlock yet, so you're still good.
That's good. Yeah, thank you. I'm not Socrates. All right. So while you're doing that, does anybody have any other questions or complaints? Or now's your time. If you think that I messed up, if you think I made a mistake, critique me. I have a thick skin. I'm not going to get offended if you think I sucked. I just want to know why.
Well, here's a nonsensical question: was Duke's avatar a picture of John Wayne?
No.
Honestly, I didn't watch the whole thing again, but based on what I saw, you were the one who was holding your composure and were patient and just bearing with the nonsense and trying not to snap at his ignorance on the base issues. As far as I could tell, you did well, but I'd have to go relook at it all over again to see where you may have stumbled over.
If you haven't watched it yet or watched the full thing, watch it, go leave a comment, then come back to this video and let me know or message me. Somebody had asked before we go off here, would you comment on explicit atheism versus implicit atheism? Yeah, those terms were brought about. I believe Smith came about with them. Basically, the way he uses it, explicit atheism is somebody who explicitly states that there are no gods. Implicit atheism is somebody who doesn't explicitly state that, which would be equivalent to a weak atheist. I don't like those usages, but I understand them. So if somebody says, Steve, you're an implicit atheist, by that terminology, sure, okay, but I'm also an implicit theist. So by using the same mirroring thing, this is why I find no value to say you're a weak atheist or you're a weak theist, because if you're a weak atheist, you got to be by mirroring a weak theist. And so what's the point of that? Why would it value to me to go around telling somebody I'm a weak theist? First of all, most people won't even understand what that meant by that, right? It has no value, it has no informative value to it. And I think that when we communicate, we want to communicate something of value. And when people say they're a weak atheist, it doesn't communicate much with me because it doesn't tell me what their beliefs are. I mean, yeah. If somebody says they're a weak atheist, all you know is they don't believe the proposition God exists, right? But if you tell me you're a weak theist, all that means to me is that they're telling me they don't believe the proposition God doesn't exist. And people think that's kind of, foolish. Why would you tell anybody you're a weak theist? That makes no sense. Well, use that argument for weak atheist.
I can't even conceive of a theist claiming that label, though, like weak theism.
Well, we're so willing to accept this weak atheism stuff that if you say, well, I'm an atheist, but I'm a weak atheist, meaning that I just don't believe, but they won't accept that you have that logically by the contrapositive, that you have to accept that if you don't agree with or accept the proposition of theism as the God exists, you are a weak theist, meaning that you're just a theist who doesn't believe in God, which of course we go, well, yeah, that's kind of stupid. Well, yeah. What's the difference? I think saying that you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, and that's what I mean by it, is just stupid. I don't see a difference. Right? How could you be an atheist and not hold the belief that gods don't exist to me? By the same token, how could you be a theist and not hold the belief that God does exist? To me, there's no difference. It is mirroring. There's symmetry there. I mean, is my symmetry off there, MJ? You're domain.
I don't hold the belief that gods don't exist.
Yeah, well, you don't. Well, yes, true. Okay, but splitting aside your personal ideology, a person who holds that a weak theist is an atheist must hold that a weak theist is a theist, which again would mean that you have a theist who doesn't believe in God. Stephen Hoyt uses a similar argument for this. He actually holds that you could be a theist and not believe in a God. And the reason he goes about doing this is something that I've argued before along these lines. So it's not like I'm the only person who sees the symmetry problem here.
Is that what you were referring to with second order beliefs?
Steve Hoyt.
I didn't mean to cut you off on my bad. I'm sorry.
I think Steve Hoyt holds he believes in God, but he just cannot know if God actually exists, like in the sense of an evidential approach. But I could be mistaken.
I think on that. It's hard to pin him down. He'll say that he's a theist, but he holds no God belief.
I think he best describes. I think he describes himself as a apatheist, if I recall. At least I think he said that when I was supposed. Yeah. But Steve, it's the ideological component that you mentioned earlier about mainstream atheism, and one that Duke has been subscribed to. I think you and I would be in agreement that it's the ideology, and ideologies in general can be dangerous, and they can be and can be not. But it's the ideology behind it, the fact that it's so headstrong but not intellectually informed, and that gains numbers. I kind of see that as very dangerous. I'm taking History 102 at the moment, and we just wrapped up on the French Revolution, and I think that's a pretty good example of how ideas can be very dangerous when they're taken to a very dangerous extreme.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, Robespierre went to the guillotine finally, which was terrifying.
By the way, somebody in the live chat who doesn't think that there's symmetry, there doesn't think my logic's right. Okay, write down your logic, send it to me, and MJ will get together with you, and you show me how they're not being symmetrical. Because again, I can use form. I don't even have to use semantics. If you don't accept P, you're weak X. Okay, so that's your form. If you don't accept P, you're weak X. Does that hold true for atheism? If you don't accept the proposition of theism, you're a weak atheist. That holds true, right? If you don't accept the proposition God does not exist, you're a weak theist. That holds true. So the form works for both of them. If you don't hold the proposition, you're weak X. So the theist would hold that the proposition is true in one case. The other proposition, the atheist would hold it's true, or in philosophical terminology. So if you don't affirm either one of those propositions, you are a weak theist and you're a weak atheist. It's a symmetry there. This is simple logic, man.
Yeah, you're making P stand for God exists, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, P and then negative P, which is God
does
not
not
exist.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't see why this is complicated. The form is the same. Do not accept P, you're weak X.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a difference between not accepting P and affirming not P.
Yeah, and so if I don't accept P, I'm not affirming it, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so I am a weak atheist if I don't affirm theism, according to Duke. Okay, by the same token, if you don't affirm the proposition of theism that God exists, you are a weak theist.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just trying.
But that actually it illustrates why that particular kind of atheist couldn't distinguish themselves from you quite nicely.
Yes.
Because if they don't accept not P, neither do you. But you don't accept P either. So you don't accept P or not P, and they just don't accept P, right?
Yeah, I actually have a logical proof of that exact same thing. I mean, I've shown that logically, if you only hold to not believe P without accepting the belief to be false, you are indistinguishably logically the same as an agnostic.
Exactly. It's not granular enough.
Yeah, and I mean, I literally have a logical proof for that. The people I've read, I've had a lot of people evaluate it. They can't find fault with it. It's not that complicated. You're literally saying that I don't have a position on it. Same with the agnostic. Okay, so how do you granularly separate? How do you distinguish? How do you separate the two positions? You can't. This is why agnostics gets assumed in atheism, and they lose their position. They lose the epistemic reasons why they hold that particular position, which means that you lose granularity, which means you lose nuance.
They just want the social capital that comes from being a sociological atheist.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty much it.
Well, I'll tell you, my prediction is that person in chat that's the extent of their argument.
You're wrong. The person in chat doesn't understand these things. Yeah, no offense, he really doesn't. I've gone back and forth for a long time. It's just he's not like a troll, so you're not going to block him. But his arguments are crap, and he doesn't understand these topics. I mean, it's just if he understood these topics, he would be able to argue logically and show me a logical proof that I'm wrong, because I have my logical proofs that I'm not wrong. So show me the logical proof, and I'll get with somebody who knows logic, and we'll look at it. But if you can't show my logic's wrong by using logic, what argument do you have? And you're also saying not just I'm wrong, but you're saying Malpass is wrong too, because on use of reason, he uses similar arguments. So,
argument.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you guys for critiquing this. Have you got any other things you want to say? Add it to the video description.
Well, I just want to say this, Steve. Will you hold this call after you stop being live? Because I want to ask you and MJ something real quick.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I'm going to actually eat. Then I'm going to call a friend of mine who's in the live chat. You know who you are. Hi. Because I promised I would, and I want to. And let's see here. Kenny Rhodes. Yeah, watch the debate, Kenny. Let me know what you think. By the way, I will be having a separate hangout. I haven't got to it yet. Sorry, Kenny. But I will be discussing my experience with Reasons to Believe and the AMP convention. I had a great time. It was amazing. These people were wonderful. All positive things to say. I was well treated. Yeah, wonderful group of people. So I'll be talking about that. And thank you, Kenny, for inviting me. Even though I lost my wallet toward the end of the trip, I have to get all new identification. I lost my money.
Oh no!
So it was worth it. It's okay. Whatever. It's only like $50 in cash in it. I lost my dog tag though. That was what kills me. I lost my dog tag. I guess to replace it, but the rest is all replaceable. I already got my new credit card. I already managed to get that. But yeah, I lost my wallet. Whatever. But I wouldn't change anything. I was well worth the trip. I met some great people that are going to be coming on to have discussions with us, about 6 PhDs. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I got to meet Hugh Ross in person, which was great. Nice guy.
He's like the nicest guy on the planet.
So nice.
He doesn't have a mean bone in his body.
Well, I mean, I didn't know this, but I maybe I did. I don't remember, but I didn't know he was on the spectrum. He's autistic. Yeah,
he is. He's good.
And yet that explains why he's so brilliant. But yeah, he's such he it was great because I was listening to his talk and he was funnier than hell. But he actually said, people had asked him after like debates, how is it you maintain your composure in debates? And he said, well, because I'm autistic and I don't get social cues, I don't realize I'm being insulted.
It's not fair. It's not fair for the rest of us. It's a superpower.
That's great. I love that. He was so blasé about it, just so stoic, and yet it was funny. I gotta admit, he was first going to listen to him talk. You know,
you
don't have to agree with him, right? You don't have to. You appreciate the fact he's a great guy. Yeah,
Steve, it's funny you mentioned that because there was a while back I came across an article from World Economic Forum, and they always said that those who are more, I don't want to say isolated, but less social and pay more attention to other things, particularly with education, they tend to be more successful in their category field of what they pursue in life and etc. So it's funny that you mentioned with Hugh Ross autism because he lacks that social pattern that most average people would. So it tends to make him more focused on his particular field of interest.
Yeah, no, I get that. And autistic people usually have, they're brilliant in what they do. They definitely excel. But it's so funny that he just doesn't recognize the social cues that he's being insulted. But I got to tell you, one of the best debates I've ever watched, and I watched it more than once, when Hugh Ross debated Ken Hovind. Damn, did he obliterate him. Hovind was a babbling idiot. It was awesome.
Yeah, but Steve, you need to realize we don't need gurus to tell us what the Bible says. Otherwise, nobody can understand what the Bible actually says without Hugh Ross, the guru.
Well, I disagree with Hugh on a lot of points, but so let's see here. What's so funny? There's a couple people in live chat that I don't even know what the hell they're arguing half the time. It's like we're all on the same page, and you have somebody that is like 2 or 3 standard deviations away from the conversation. And it's just like, what the hell are they talking about? It's like, and yet they're talking about epistemology, but they're so bizarre in their understanding of it. And I don't even know how to bring it back sometimes. It's like,
well, I often think that people come to streams like this and then they get into another conversation in live chat. And it's like, are they even listening to the stream?
I don't mind that. No, I do the same thing sometimes. I don't mind.
Yeah.
But what I think is funny is when they argue such straw mans. It's like people that disagree with me, I think most of the time they don't understand the concepts and they're just arguing straw man. So I can't really spend too much time on them. And I don't mean that disparagingly. Matt says, oh, I'm smug. No, it's just a time saver. I don't have that much time to waste with people that don't want to learn the topics. So.
By the way, speaking of that, I was watching some of that debate, and Duke did not seem prepared at all. Like
very unprepared.
I was like, okay.
Yeah,
was he? He was an atheist, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, he's the reason why there's a whole meme of cringy atheists. Just saying.
Well, let me ask a good question. I mean, did he ever actually say that he believes gods don't exist? I don't remember. Because he said he's agnostic. He said he doesn't have a position either way.
Oh, so I thought he was an atheist.
Yeah, no, I think he's a weak atheist. Which is an atheist. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not atheists, but he's holding to the weak atheist approach. But what's funny is if I had more time, Athena, I would have asked him, well, do you hold to naturalism? And I'm almost sure he would have said yes, that he's a methodological, or a ontological, or a naturalist, which means that to be consistent in his framework, he has to hold the belief that God doesn't exist, which of course has a burden of proof, which to him it doesn't. He says that theism is the belief that God exists, but it's not a claim. What?
This is weird. Yeah, people are weird.
It was very, very weird.
By the way, John, I was watching some. I gotta go back and watch it. But I was watching some of, I was watching you on the Raging Atheist. Like I didn't watch your. I've actually talked to the Messenger Reveals. He seemed like a nice guy. That apparently there's.
The Raging
There
Atheist
was.
seems like a nice guy. I watched some
Well,
of
no,
the
no,
videos.
no, 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 not the Raging Atheist. I'm
Okay.
talking about the Messenger Reveals because
I,
today. I don't know. Go ahead, Steve.
I don't
You're
know.
gonna end this.
No, who's that?
Well, no, I was talking to John. Apparently, John talked with the Messenger Revealed, and today he was on a. Is John even there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I thought I was talking to the wind or something.
Well, and the thing is, though, is that you've been talking at me for a minute or so, and it's been breaking up on me. I think on my end, I'm having some problems with my.
Oh.
But could you just give me a synopsis of what you just said? You said you saw a little bit of it, and what now?
Yeah, I saw a little bit of the talk today with the Raging Atheist, and you also had a talk with the Messenger Reveals. I've talked to him too. He seems like a nice guy, but apparently you two had troubles. I don't know. I didn't catch the full thing. I only caught a little bit.
Well, my opinion at this point is, and that's not to say that it can't be changed, is that the Messenger Reveals plays the part of a nice guy, but that there's a lot of behavior that he accuses others of displaying that he himself displays.
Why don't I know this person?
What's that?
I never heard of this person.
I think he's fairly new.
Interesting. Well, I got to tell you this. I did. I mean, I know who Raging Atheist is, and he had a video somebody had me watch, and I had written on. I was like, yeah, he went against Darn's deity, and I told him, I was like, dude, you might want to hold off going against DD because DD was actually right for a change. Yes, I can't believe I said that, but DD was actually right in his logic here. He got something right for a change, but it was basic stuff. But Raging Atheist was really not understand the logic. And I was like, look, when DD makes you look bad, you need to step away. Come get me. I'll help you out with this. And he recognized it. He actually was appreciative of it. And he said, hey, Steve, I'd love to have you talk to me more about this, to have these conversations where I'm more prepared for somebody who's like Darwin, because Darwin is deceptive as shit, right?
Yeah.
But he certain basic stuff he does know. And if you don't even know that basic stuff, you're going to look pretty silly.
Well, yeah. You know, the Messenger Reveals, he's the one that I asked you about the other day about he's the one that said that the truth is not always accurate.
Not always accurate.
He said that.
I think.
Yeah, the truth is not always accurate, he claimed.
What did he mean by that?
Yeah, I'm like, what?
You tell me.
I mean, was he trying to say that what we think is the truth could be shown to be inaccurate later down the road?
Well, I mean, if that's precisely what he meant, then that's true. But the fact of the matter is, if something that was held to be true is found that it's not to be true, then it was never true to begin with. The truth is always accurate by definition.
Yeah, that's like saying knowledge can never be false. Knowledge always has to be true.
He also claims that any unknown is supernatural.
By the way, Steve, side.
That's just dumb.
Yeah.
Well, here's the problem.
Do we notice
whether Area 51 has aliens or not? That's completely unknown. That's not something supernatural.
Yeah, that makes no sense to me whatsoever either.
I mean,
I do gotta end this real quick. I don't want too much longer, so let me get Gasper. You wanted to say something? You had messaged me.
You're muted.
You have to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you.
Oh, hey.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay. No. I think it's kind of gone off in a different direction. I just kind of jumped in. Y'all are talking about epistemology and truth and propositions. Is that right?
Yep, we were. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I was just listening at this point.
Oh, no worries. Okay. Yeah, we did you watch the debate?
Yeah.
Okay, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was all right. Yeah. The other dude
I'm
was
praised. Steve, you sucked. No, I'll accept it.
no.
All right, whatever.
No, I just think the other party didn't really like the idea of non-cognitivism, and I don't know, what wasn't really willing to consider it. In my opinion, non-cognitivism is something you do after a proposition has been put forth, because a proposition is a statement asserted true. So everything is initially going to be asserted true, even something as paradoxical as, like, say, the liar's paradox. It gets to have that basic state of being a proposition, but then you might go past that logical framework and say, well, we're going to decide that this is non-cognitive, and that it's actually just not even worth asking whether it's true or not, true or false.
Yeah,
so,
and that's where he got confused, though. He didn't understand that a non-cognitivist would say that all moral content is nonsensical or has no meaning, is meaningless. And he at first said it, well, that's bullshit, and I disagree with it. Then he's like, well, what do you mean by it? What is it? He's disagreeing with me before he even understands what the concept was.
Yeah.
That was odd.
Yeah. So, and then I guess he got a little bit excited too. So, it is what it is.
Well, it was his first debate, and I give him props for that. And as Ocean said, this was your first debate. Why would you debate Steve? I thought that was funny. I think thank you very much. I mean, I people that know me for years knows that I go into a debate planning ahead. Athena's seen my other debates, even though one debate got deleted. You remember the debate I had with Ronnie, right?
Yes, it's been a while since I've seen it, but
okay, but it was deleted, so I have no evidence for this. But am I right or wrong to say that I brought two presentations that obliterated him to the point where he literally had said, and I'm quoting here, "I don't want to continue."
Well, I mean, Steve. Well, I mean, regarding Ronnie, you what the hell did he say? You can't prove it. It was like he deletes videos to rewrite history, and then we said you can't. I forget what the fuck he was saying. He said at one point, but that was so stupid that. Well, yeah, you're right. You obliterated him. I just don't remember that hangout.
But he did say that he didn't want to go on, right? He was like, before the Q&A, he was like, I don't want to go on with this, because he was just getting trounced.
I mean, is it so hard to study a topic? Seriously. I mean, yeah, okay, a lot of people are lazy and they don't want to put in the effort. Okay, fine, I get that, but if you're gonna pass off yourself off as an expert, Ronnie, you might as well open a goddamn book and understand what it says.
Yeah, I don't think he had a clue. And somebody had noted the other night that I may know more about things than I even let on sometimes. Like last night, I was talking about science, and we got to all kinds of stuff that I never really get a chance to talk about. But it was informative, and I don't think Ronnie understood that I had specific training in these areas. I mean, I learned about turbine theory, and so I may not remember a hell of a lot. I know enough to just wipe the floor with him, because that's something that I actually literally studied. And so he was way out of his depths, and he recognized it. But that's one of the reasons why I'm saying him, right? Because he's like talking about Pelton wheel, and he's talking about this and then. I'm like, dude, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
No, he's always out of his depth. He's always out of his depth.
You bring up an interesting point, Athena, especially in today's world. Even if you accepted a debate on a subject you didn't feel particularly learned in, how hard is it to get on Google and research it beforehand and at least go in with a modicum of understanding?
I mean, as I said, I've talked to a few people about this. They outright admitted that they're lazy. You know what I mean? One guy's, I saw a guy, well, why don't you study neuroscience? Why don't you study it? And he's like, oh, because I'm lazy. I'm like, okay. Okay.
Well, I mean, don't you think, okay, and I'll leave you guys with this, but don't you think that if you want to win a debate, and I don't mean and just by rhetoric, I want to actually give the information, and I want people to believe that I'm correct, because I believe that I am correct, and you go verify it, right? I'm not trying to just persuade people for any ideological reasons, right? But wouldn't you think, though, if you want to come at me and show an audience that I'm incorrect in my usage or whatever it is, you would know the material and read what I read so you have a better understanding of how to argue against it if that's what your goal is.
Before anyone else answers, sorry. I was watching some of that, and what I found hilarious is that he was denying your sources, Stanford, and I don't know what other source you use. I'm like, what? How do you deny it? I'm not trying to argue from authority here, but did you even? Sorry, I'm just.
It's hard. You can't say that. He literally said SCP is wrong. It's like, well, okay, you need to give me a reason why it's wrong. Because if you think it's SCP is wrong, this is how it would work. MJ, if somebody has some misinformation about SCP, you would probably write to SCP and saying, look, you have a mistake here, and maybe they were corrected. Although these are papers, right? I don't know how you would actually edit that.
Yeah, the contributors to these types of references online, they would be more than happy to hear about corrections. Like
Yes.
if I were to read about something like that, scholarship and professional academics love having corrections pointing out to them because it gives them the opportunity to reassess their views and look at things from fresh eyes, from fresh perspectives and things like that. It's almost like a camaraderie among scholarship because you're trying to find out something together as a community. And a lot of people might see what you don't see. That's what's so awesome about talking with a bunch of people about a certain topic. But if he thinks that he has something new to contribute to that article, these people that actually contributed to the SCP articles, they have their emails at the bottom of the article, email them, and they really respond within 1 to 2 calendar days, honestly.
Yeah,
they love the input.
I know Malpass has reached out to him.
Awesome.
I was going to see what happened there before I reached out to him.
Yeah.
But other people I've contacted, if you're polite and you understand the topic, they're more willing to talk to you. I've never had one that wasn't.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hopefully,
Steve.
He's supposed to come on soon if you know who he is.
Grand Priest? Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's one of the leading modal logical persons in the world. I mean, and yet he's willing to come on the show because I happened to reach out to him and I was very nice about it. So
yeah, it's okay to have the I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Oh yeah. Okay. So he's into modal logic. That's really cool. Let's see. What's he going to talk about?
Possible world semantics.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's really.
Because I had an argument one time, and because Ozzy and I was talking to Ozzy, and I was like, okay, look, I'm willing to accept, obviously, that if something's logically possible, it must exist in some possible world. Okay, fair enough. So if a God is logically possible, some type of God that's logically possible, it must exist in some possible world. That's not a problem. But I'm a moral anti-realist. I'm a modal anti-realist. But there's arguments for modal realism. And modal realism would state that these possible worlds are ontologically in existence.
David Lewis. Yep.
David Lewis, right. And so when I was talking to Grand Priest about this, he said that David Lewis is a modal realist. Yes. However, I asked him, I said, well, if you're a modal realist and you hold that a God is logically possible, wouldn't that make you a theist? Ozzy thinks so. I think so.
Well, he's going to say that God is necessarily non-existent. And
that's the way that's what he said about Lewis. He would say that Lewis would argue that gods are logically inconsistent and therefore they want to exist in any possible world, which means that he wouldn't be a theist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to say something about this real quick. Okay. So I've talked to a lot of modal theists, and I've had a group on Facebook that's mainly about, for the most part, symbolic proofs. And in my opinion, the modal arguments for theism are kind of, well, they may be valid, but it all depends on whether you accept the fundamentals of modal logic. For example, they have this really cool mathematical form of propositional logic, then predicate calculus, but then with modal logic, they introduce these two new operators, the possibility and the necessity. And the possibility operator makes it kind of hard to make truth tables meaningful, long story short. And so that's to circumvent that problem and start talking about possible worlds. But you can always just say, well, hey, if you can't make truth tables with it, then GTFO.
Well, I'm trying to make you truth table. And I understand the operators you're talking about. So if you have like square P, that's going to be a modal operator that it is necessarily true. You have the diamond shape that's impossible to be true.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are modal.
And it still applies. Yeah, and with the possibility operator, it's still perfectly fine if P is true and false because it's still possible.
Right.
And so
there you go.
it's still just not useful to the truth tables.
Is that the square of opposition? Yeah, that's square of opposition. That's Aristotle's square of opposition, right? We have contraries, contradictories, and subalterations. Oh, I didn't want to show you.
That was the modal. That was the modal square of opposition.
They have one for modal
logic.
Yeah.
What book is that?
MJ,
what book is that?
How is that any different than square of opposition? Looks pretty the same.
One has to do with the modality that attaches to the propositions, and the other one's just categorical proposition.
Yeah, or it's quantifiers.
Look at
the
those
original one is all in sum.
I didn't know you ever got on camera, MJ. I hope you're not doxing yourself.
Oh, I don't care. I'm ugly. I'm a strong 3 out of 10.
Sorry, I was just asking what book was he was showing on screen.
Oh, this is co-written by Moreland and Craig, Philosophical Foundations.
Philosophical Foundations.
Yeah, I'm not kidding with MJ. MJ's pretty well read.
MJ, I got that one. I just haven't read it.
MJ, if you're a 3, then the scale must go negative to entail what I.
Yeah, I'm like -5. Screw you.
I mean, I'm a -100.
Oh, a modest 100, huh?
We're getting competitive in our ugliness.
I gotta say, Athena doesn't quite sound like what I expected Athena to sound like.
Well, yeah, everyone expects me to be a woman, but nah.
Homer had it wrong.
But I remember during the debate you also mentioned that there was this this like atheist organization that cares more about numbers and normal. I'm like, what? It was just said. Wow, I never knew that. Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but at the same time, it's like if you care more about numbers, then what makes you any different than a religion? I mean, right? Like they want people to go to them to.
One sec. I respond to things. So talk about yourselves.
Steve, I'm going to because I got assignments to do before midnight. But good chatting with y'all and catch y'all later.
All right, Steven.
Yeah, I gotta roll out too. I got a few things I gotta do. All right. Anyways,
don't forget to hold the call for a minute, Steve.
Yeah, I won't leave the call. But like I said, Sweet Heathen, I'll be talking to you in a few. I got to do something for Reds real quick. And then I'll call you afterwards. And I also got to order some food. I think I'm gonna order pizza tonight. Why not? I'm gonna splurge. I'm hungry. But anyways, thanks for watching this, guys. Again, leave your critiques in the comments. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. All I ask is you give me reasons. Everybody who's left me comments so far on the actual debate, they're just nonsensical. They're just basically running the same rhetoric. I don't think you have any evidence. You have no papers. You have no. Quote me something, cite me something. I'm waiting for one atheist to go, hey, here's a citation for you, and not use a dictionary. I mean, come on, up your game a little bit, people. So, anything you want to add? Yes. Nope. You are super low priority. You are the bottom of the barrel here. Yes. You got boobs, man. I mean, that wins. I mean, that trumps all you people. So, yeah. Boobs are the trump card, are they not?
Well, demonetized.
Oh, I just. All right, so yes, you can't. That's true. You can't compete with Reds. I'll give you. If I have boobs and Reds, then yeah, Reds is going to win every time. So, all right, I'm out, guys. And again, thank you for watching. Leave comments. Let me know. Peace.